What's going on, Workforce? Brian here, and today we're reviewing Final Fantasy XIV Stormblood. If you're worried about spoilers, no worries, we're not going to be talking about any spoilers with the game so far, but if you're just interested in our thoughts and overall score for the game, you're in the right place. So let's go ahead and just do this thing. So Stormblood represents a major milestone for Final Fantasy XIV. It brings changes, some welcome and some not so welcome, to the battle system, while at the same time bringing in new gameplay elements for quests that really kind of help freshen up that experience. But in the end, it delivers a solid RPG with solid gameplay and a solid story, and I'd find myself hard-pressed not to recommend the game to pretty much anyone. And for me personally, the changes to PvP make this game so worth it. I'd highly recommend for anybody on the fence to definitely give this a hard-pressed look to see if it's something you want to pick up. So now let's just go ahead and break it down piece by piece. First up, let's talk about the gameplay. So with gameplay, we've got to basically break it down into PvE and PvP elements. From a PvE perspective, I've already talked about how the changes to the quests and the new content they've introduced as part of the gameplay elements have really kind of freshened up that experience. But the boss fights and the battle system in and of itself, especially when you get to level cap of around 70, I find that I'm not necessarily missing so many of my abilities. Sure, it might be a little bit jarring coming from Heavensward, but as a new player coming into the game, I'd be hard-pressed to find anything that I was missing from the system in and of itself. I'll never forget you, Stone Skin and Sustain, but at the end of the day, the new abilities definitely help bring some freshness to the battle system that has long been needed. The new UI elements really kind of help add to the gameplay, some areas more so than others, especially some jobs specifically, but that all being said, you shift into PvP and the changes there are fundamentally different. Because they so simplified the skills, it really makes it easy both to get in and to compete. PvP is about movement, it's about quick damage, and they've taken all that into account as opposed to PvP, and separating the two gameplay systems is a huge benefit to everybody involved. So, as somebody who really has always enjoyed PvP, I can say that I really enjoy it now in Stormblood. And the changes here get me hopeful for the future with promises of new PvP on the horizon. So from a gameplay perspective, both areas excel in what they do. They really add a lot of freshness to the jobs themselves. And I know a lot of press has been given to those changes because there are a lot of people who are invested in their jobs. But at the end of the day, as we get acclimated to those changes for PvE, they're going to fade into the background and they're going to become just as natural as before, with allowing hopefully more players to raise up their skill with it. It's not as punishing as it was before, while at the same time being still rewarding for the highly skilled player who wants to maximize their rotations. So now, let's talk about story. So without spoiling any bit of the story for you guys, I feel like there's still some major themes, especially from Game of Thrones, that were brought into Final Fantasy XIV. Now this isn't Final Fantasy Game of Thrones, but there's some elements, there's some characterizations, and things like that are really kind of stood out and that I felt, I was like, wow, this kind of feels Game of Thronesy. And that's not a bad thing. The story, I think, was solid, it was well delivered, and the highlight of the story for me personally is that Xenos has been the villain that we've been needing for a very long time. And that's not knocking any of the previous story in the game. It's always, I felt like, been some of the best, especially for an online game. But specifically with Xenos, I have to say that he is by far the standout, in my opinion. Somebody who was was definitely somebody I wanted to fight continually. He he makes no apologies for who he is and what he wants to do. And honestly, that's refreshing. It was really exciting to see them take that direction with that character. And it's something to be experienced by all. The story of the liberation of not just one city, but two, spanning continents, having these characters go on this really great journey. A lot of fist clenching, for sure. I think those memes are readily apparent in the Final Fantasy XIV community. But this story is not to be missed. It's to be enjoyed. The voice acting in it, and we'll talk about it more in a second, is some of the best that I've seen in the game so far. And whenever it's not there, it is missed. And that's just one of the things that just kind of always been weird about the story in and of itself. Some parts have it, some parts don't. You just kind of get used to it. But I really enjoyed the story very much, and I'm looking forward to seeing where they take it in the future. So now let's talk about the game's graphics. Final Fantasy XIV has always been a beautiful game, and honestly I think that it only gets even better with Stormblood. The zones are fantastic and the weather effects are incredible. I don't think we got some kind of light year type leap that some people might have been expecting with the dropping up PS3 support and even low grade PC support, but all in all I think the game is better for it, especially in the long run. Very much excited to see where they take the game visually here going forward, but the game looks beautiful. The PS4 Pro patch that everybody's been telling me about, they report that it looks fantastic on a PS4 Pro. We play on a PS4 and a PC, and the game looks great on the PS4 and the PC both. It runs fantastically, and visually the effects, the battle system effects, and all the job related stuff looks great. And the zones, again, I can't praise them visually as well designed artistically enough. This game looks great, and it's always looked great, so there really isn't any kind of real positive or negative one way or another here. The game continually is consistent in this department. So now let's talk about sound and voice acting. So my only issue with voice acting is that when you go look at the primal fights and the incredible job they did in the voices there, Susano for me is a standout voice acted appearance, but obviously in the story the voice acting is top notch. But then you go into something like Omega the Deltascape and those bosses aren't voice acted, and it feels kind of like a step down. While the boss fights are great, going from the primals into this does feel come on, you're almost wishing that they took the time to add it in there. Obviously, we don't know what that would be impacting development wise, etc., but it is missed where it is not there, and that applies to the story because it is so good. So the voice acting, they did not miss a beat. They definitely hit the right notes. I didn't find any characters for me that were particularly off-putting. Sometimes I always find one or two that, especially within a Japanese-style RPG, that usually I'm like, that's just not for me from that delivery, but I didn't really kind of find any of that here, so that's a real positive. Then switching into music, the music in this game is fantastic. I think the standout for me is the Azim Steppe. That area, I could just listen to that soundtrack all day long. That theme is just so well done, but that in and of itself, shouldn't underscore the rest of the score in the game. The battles, the different zones, all of it is top notch and really enjoyable. So bravo to Square Enix and especially the sound team there for delivering such an impactful experience. I'm very much looking forward when the soundtrack officially comes out for this expansion. So now let's go ahead and just talk about the world. My only fear about the world is that at some point there's not going to be anything to do in it. While you're leveling, doing fates and all of that, it makes sense to be out and about in the world, but once you're at cap, pretty much I feel like the game might revert back to kind of queuing up from content from your house in whatever city area that is located in. And I think that's a real shame. Hopefully we're going to see gameplay elements updated or enhanced that help encourage players to be out and about in the world other than some kind of relic fate grind. Hopefully we won't see that again this time. But the world design is superb, and that's really where I hope that we'll get to see more people out and about in it for various reasons and for various activities. And that's just always been my personal hope for the series. Without getting into game theory and what I would think would help do that, the world is to be experienced, and I really enjoyed going through it in the story, and hopefully as the story progresses over the next couple patches that we'll get to see more of that world. And that would be the best case scenario because it is so good. It was so much fun to explore, and it's still fun to run around in, especially if you're doing fates and side quests at this time. Having unlocked flight, it feels so good, and swimming and diving cannot be underscored. Obviously, I think diving kind of wears off pretty quickly because they're outside of, a few kind of gather this or go touch that glowy thing. There really isn't much to do underwater. But then that's okay. It's not necessarily a bad thing. I think that they kind of balance it pretty well. And so, all in all, I'm very, very fond of the world in and of itself. Now, let's go ahead and just give this game an overall score. No game is perfect, but if I were to give Final Fantasy XIV a score on a 10-point scale, I would have to commit to a 9.4 easily. Where this game excels, it excels. It excels well, and it is a blast to play, especially if you've got friends and family to play with. We've been doing a lot of gaming over the last couple of weeks as a family, running dungeons and leveling up. It is a blast. I can say that all in all, from a 4.0 perspective, this game delivers a lot of content and also the promise of more future content to come. Square Enix has done a fantastic job, and Yoshi-P and his development team have been doing a fantastic job with the patch cycle every 3 to kind of 4 months, etc. So that shows no sign of slowing down, and with more and future content that is promised and it's on the horizon, the return to Ivalice 24-man raid seems very exciting and interesting. There is only better to come, and so the score also includes the promise of content to come as well. But that's just my score. I am obviously biased and a fan of the game, and I'd love to know yours. If you're playing Stormblood, let me know in the comments below what you think about it, and if you were going to score the 4.0 patch, what score you would give it, and you can make up any kind of scale that you want to. You don't have to stick with a 10-point scale. You can rate it in pizza, because pizza's delicious. But let me know in the comments below, and let's have that conversation. But anyway, this is Brian for Work to Game. Thanks so much for watching this video, and we hope to see you in our next. But until then, we hope you have a fantastic week, and take care. Hey everybody, Brian and Chuck here for Work to Game. Chuck wants to tell you that you should totally subscribe to the channel. And that you should totally hit that like button. Oh, and then we also got t-shirts on sale for some reason. That's a little bit mean, Chuck. I'm not crazy.